Welcome, ISK Legacy, to the Week 7 recap. It was a busy week in the NFL, in our league, and in my life, not that you care so much. Got the shipment this past week, which means I'm surrounded by boxes and still haven't figured out how to put an entire house worth of things into an apartment that was already full, so here's hoping that gets better. It's ISK week for those who are still in Kenya or East Africa and know what I'm talking about. A few of our players, our league players, are down there coaching in both Joburg and volleyball in Zimbabwe. That's been distracting me because obviously I have to watch all the games of the team I used to coach and then send their current coach about 100,000 messages a day just because I can't help myself. But I did finally get around to the wrap-ups. I want to do it before Week 8 because Week 7 in the NFL was an exciting one. There was a lot of big finishes. It was National Tight Ends Day for all those who celebrated. So let's get straight to the wrap-up of the week before we get to our matchups. Week 7, as it does, was more of an equalizer. Now, there was a return to form for offenses, which we'll talk about in a second, but one of the biggest things is I feel like sometimes when you're forced to try and look up stories and talk about these things, maybe we overestimate. Last week, I made a bit of a stink about teams who might already start tanking. That was a bit premature. You can't tank that easily in football. Plus, all the teams that had a reason to lose didn't. Now, granted, the Broncos were playing the Packers, and you could argue that both had a reason to kind of throw it, but the Packers were looking better, and the Broncos got their second win. You look at the Giants, they could have tanked, they didn't. Bears and Raiders, arguably, they both could have been the tank field, but certainly the Bears, and they definitely didn't, coming out with a good offensive performance. The Colts fell short to the Browns, but just barely, and they could have probably been a little bit more moderate. The Patriots, probably the big one, taking down the Bills, who are a lot of people's favorites, and then the Vikings, which I'll speak about later, because obviously against the 49ers, that's quite a big deal. So we did have an even balance here, and while we still have two teams that stand out in the Eagles and the Chiefs, preseason favorites, looked great. Eagles did a great job against a tough Miami, and the Chiefs actually looked fun again to cheer for. They had an offense that was worth watching, so that kind of helped level things up. I do think leading into the week, if you looked at the previous weeks, I made a comment about how scores were in general down. Doing a little bit of research, I was looking at things like sacks have been a little bit up this year. And there is this massive percentage that if you get sacked on the first two downs, or even obviously third down's a big sacking down that ends the drive. But even if you get sacked in the first two downs, statistically, you don't end up converting the fourth down at a high rate. And sacks have been a lot higher this year. They were a little bit lower this past week. Maybe that had something to do with it. Either way, defenses were getting tired. Offenses sure weren't, which doesn't always happen in the cooler weather. So that was actually kind of fun to see. We noticed this in our fantasy scores because there was more green than red. Now, unfortunately, still a few of you were stuck in the red zone, not the good red zone, but being in the red. But a lot of us were in the green. In fact, one of the disappointing things could have been, this is one of those weeks that you can look at your score, look back at previous weeks and be like, wow, if I would have had that in week 4 or week 5, I would have been successful. But hey, you weren't. Also, randomly, we love our days for no particular reason. Happy National Tight End Day. If you were watching on Sunday, they made a big stink. They made T-shirts. It was essentially a made-up holiday, but you can make the arguments that most holidays are in fact made up. And weirdly enough, the tight ends came to form. In terms of non-quarterback-based positions, Travis Kelce was our number 1 tight end. I'll get to him in just a second. But number 6 and number 7 overall were Andrews and Waller. So we had 3 tight ends. If you compare tight end and wide receiver, they were in the top 10 for that. Quite good, right? And Kelce being at the top of the heap. Not quite as good as the quarterbacks. He was 3rd overall in scoring if you include everybody. But his number 1 was obviously Mahomes. If you watch that game, pretty entertaining. I think the announcing booth is getting a better indication of how many times you can mention Taylor Swift and infer the wrath of people who are upset about everything online. Although I have to say, as someone who doesn't really have a dog in the fight, but I certainly don't hate the mentions. I think it's fine. I don't think it's ruining football to mention that someone famous is in the stands. But I got to say, Taylor has better friends than most other NFL players. You look at someone like Carr, throws the ball massively out of bounds, doesn't know how to operate in front of people, plus he looks kind of freaky if you just get some screenshots of him, but throws the ball out of bounds and yells at his receiver. Now, Olave, his receiver, is not known for being the brightest. In fact, you could look up a really entertaining video of him being stopped by the police, expecting preferential treatment and getting none of it. But, clearly when you have a behavior that is socially unacceptable, Your friends, if they're your true friends, try and correct you. And these NFL players like Carr don't show that. Whereas Taylor, if you look at the way she's cheering, she's much better at cheering on point. She definitely is aware the camera's in front of her, but she's playing up to them. She had a little high five action with Mahomes' wife, so that's always kind of nice. So I think at least she's taking feedback and becoming a better spectator. Perhaps some of these others could be just as open. In terms of another story, I think the Bears present an interesting one here. We've had an explosive offense for the last little bit, Fields being out. But one of the coolest people I was looking up, Tyson Bagent, I think it's Bagent, the backup who is now the starter until Fields' finger feels better. Crazy story. So his dad is a professional, or was a professional arm wrestler. He was a Div 2 player, so not Div 1. He won the version of the Heisman that you give to the Player of the Year last year for Div 2. But his football career ended because he lost in the national semifinals, I believe, to the Colorado School of Mines. $10 if you knew that was a school beforehand, or if you can name their mascot. Are you guessing? Can you figure it out? It's the Ore Diggers. The Colorado Mines Ore Diggers. Yep. You learned something new there because there's no way you knew that before. He's an interesting story. Came out and had a great game. Obviously led them to a win. Another big upset was obviously the one on Monday night. Now that dictated a lot of our fantasy matchups, which we'll get to in a second. Now McCaffrey played, which had to be a massive relief for anyone who had him coming into a Monday night with a star running back who you don't know if is going to play. Hella nerve-wracking, so I don't envy that position. McCaffrey did fine. Everyone else not so much. Now, Purdy's an interesting one. You can't ever really get mad at him. He has one of the most favorable contracts in the league. He's actually, if you took all the backup, so all the quarterbacks and the backups, just the backup quarterbacks, he is the 34th ranked backup quarterback in terms of how much pay he gets. If you take all quarterbacks, he's over the 64th best paid quarterback. So obviously one of the cheapest quarterbacks in the game. He's a starting quarterback, but you know the NFL, they hate their players. They'd rather they just run into a pile and die than actually support them. So there's no way of restructuring this unless he tries to get out of his contract, which you essentially can't do like you can in other sports. So he's over the 12th. There's 1,200 people, more than 1,200 people in the NFL getting paid more than him, even though he's in a premier team and a premier position. But he didn't really step up against Minnesota. Shock of the world that Minnesota is actually rallying. For a lot of people, they were calling that this could be Cousins' last ever game as a Viking, and then he was going to get traded. Turns out not. For those of you who have been reading sports journalism well into the 90s, there's something called the Ewing theory. You can look it up, or I can share a link with you. Effectively, there was a New York Knicks team that Patrick Ewing was their best player. He got hurt and then went on this massive run and made it to the finals. I think it was in 99. I'd have to check that up. But the Ewing theory suggests that sometimes when your best player is out, everybody else steps up and somehow you become a better team. Justin Jefferson out. Possible Ewing theory candidate here. We have Addison, who was more than happy to step up. So all this to say, I had a second week in a row where I got to watch a ton of football. Again, the football I can't say was amazing, but I had a hell of a time. The games were tight. It was fun to watch, fun to cheer for fantasy. Speaking of fantasy, let's get to the matchups. How did our number one seed respond to their first loss last week? By coming out and crushing everyone this week. They had the top score of week 7. Unfortunately for Marco, who put up a solid 158, and we'll get to him and his luck in a second. But almost 180 was well enough to put back the win and get back to their winning ways. So Connor and Seamus, well done. How did they do so? With the not so usual suspects, actually. I mean, Mahomes, you would have think that this was just his normal week. This is the first time he actually looked like Mahomes that was in the quarterback series, right? I mean, 4 touchdowns and 400 yards is a bit much to expect, but this is definitely closer to where I think a lot of people thought he would be. He was obviously our QB1. Andrews was our tight end 3 during National Tight End Day, so congratulations. And Gibbs finally had a game. I mean, granted, he was the only one in the backfield, but he also just had a solid effort on both catching and rushing out of the backfield. He was the running back 3. Nakua's continuing to be one of the best steals, wide receiver 4, and that was more than enough to make up for some of the shortcomings. Most specifically, obviously, Bijan, no bueno. I know he's getting looked at, or Atlanta's getting questioned. It'll probably amount to nothing about not reporting his sickness, but apparently Saturday night he started feeling not great. He woke up and didn't feel himself Sunday morning, and they didn't report anything, which you're supposed to do for degenerates like us who like to gamble. So shame on you, but it didn't really affect Connor and Seamus in this particular one. They did luck out a little bit. I don't know if anyone was watching, but Michael Pittman actually did not have a good game. I played him in another league, and I can tell you we were so dangerously close to him getting essentially blanked, one catch for a minimal amount of yards, and then bam, I think it was like a 75-ish approximately yard touchdown. So that'll do it. In terms of the bench, I believe he's got a couple points here he could have gone to, but he didn't really need any extras, and he did survive a little bit of a bye week, and he actually stepped mine. He's one of the few people I know that didn't play Ridley. Ridley's been a bit of a tricky bugger here on this one. He hasn't always been... he's had a couple big weeks. His average is good, but his week by week really fluctuates. So I think a lot of people would have put Ridley in for Pittman, so congratulations there. That helped. Maybe that's why you're the top of our league. In terms of Marco, you are having just piss poor luck this year in a lot of ways. You had a great performance. Kirk has been probably one of the underrated all-stars here. He just is putting up consistent performances. He's now essentially your most consistent receiver, I'd say, with I don't think I would blame Devontae Adams for the situation in Las Vegas. But he can't throw it to himself, and whoever's behind can't really throw it to him either. Aside from that, no real stinkers. I mean, Foreman obviously is the story. He was the running back one, and we knew this early coming out. Finally had one of those outings. He seems to do one or two a year. Who knows? Does that make it more complex next week when there might be some other health issues where not his health issues, but Rashawn Johnson looks like he might be coming back. Don't know if that'll pick away at him. Evans again had another great outing in his quest for 1,000 yards. So realistically, I mean, we can look down here past your bench. You definitely, but Marco, I mean, you got to say, if you would have squeaked out a win on a bye week like this, that would have been pretty exceptional, but unfortunately, no bueno. But we do look, you can count. I believe you are our third highest scoring team, Marco, so you would have beaten everyone but, Connor, and actually the gentleman who's speaking right now, who we'll talk about next. So unlucky, Marco. You're not out of the woods yet. We'll see that when we get to the league standings, but keep fighting. We'll see how it works out for you. But Connor and Seamus, at least one more week at the top of the hill. Congrats. Odd segue, but speaking of me, I had the second highest scoring team, and I kind of needed it against Maddie here because 151 was good enough to beat most. We had another one of those weeks just checking out the scores down here where effectively the top four scorers played each other, but that's just the luck of the draw, unfortunately, and it just dropped Maddie to 4-3. How did I do it? Lamar Jackson was my huge guy here. I think no qualms about that one. Although Kamara was also our running back 2, Jackson also quarterback 2, next to the aforementioned Mahomes in the previous little segment there. And then again, I mean, my tight end, I had to pick up a floater here, and again, no one's really throwing the ball with any consistency in Vegas, so I felt the brunt of that. And Watson had kind of I'm not going to say kind of, definitely a super disappointing performance. I thought Green Bay against Denver, I mean, everyone scores against Denver, ... except Green Bay apparently. But St. Brown more than made up for it. Cleveland's defense was one of the only ones that were actually started. There was another one that was number 1 that we'll get to, I think, in a minute. But Cleveland was the defense 3. That certainly helped me out. So while their offense couldn't do anything at all, unfortunately for me, Indy just kept coughing up the ball, so that was quite lovely. In terms of Matty, he had a great performance again. Hurts and Brown certainly came out. Hurts was just outside of our top 5. He was just 6, depending on scoring in other leagues. He did a little bit better. A.J. Brown was the wide receiver 2. Goddard in tight end day was our tight end 5. Think about this. There have been weeks that the tight end 5 gets like 8 points. Tight end 5 got 18.7 points. I'd say his biggest disappointments are 2 of his more reliable candidates here. Eckler just had a horrible outing. We're not really sure what's going on with him. And Tua against Philly just didn't produce, which didn't help Matty out at all. He needed all the points he can get. So sorry about that one, Woody. You did get a touchdown from Rice, which great pickup there. I think he's sneaky being one of Mahomes' favorite targets. And unfortunately for you, New Orleans defense couldn't really help you out. In terms of our bench, there were some points to be left. Look at me here putting Josh Downs. Josh Downs was actually our wide receiver 3. Could have put him out there. Who knew that Carr actually would do something? So, hey, look, folks, if you need some people, I got people who are scoring. Throw me a trade offer. Just saying. You as well, though, Woody. You had Stevenson and Pickett on the bench that maybe could have helped you out. But to be honest with you, aside from, I don't know why you would have put Stevenson in instead of Eckler. I don't think he turns the tide. Just would have make you feel a little bit better about yourself. So I move ahead. 5-2, technically get myself into playoff contention. Matty drops to 4-3, still well on the hunt, and you're a high-scoring team, so I wouldn't be thrown in the towel quite yet, buddy. With our top 4 scoring teams out of the way, let's make way for our 5th scoring team in a walk-off here against Jeff. Maxon keeps his winning ways going, 5-2. He's got a lot of points scored this year, so he gets our 2nd seed. He's chasing Connor and Seamus and has the most realistic chance of getting them at this point. How did they do so? Addison was a huge outing. I don't know if anyone predicted this one against San Francisco's defense. I would say Maxon didn't because he had San Francisco's defense. That's kind of a kick in the shorts. But, I'd take it. 35 from wide receiver and just a couple points from your defense. That's fine. He also had a lot invested on that Monday nighter. He was sweating it out to the end. I was a little nervous for him, for McCaffrey, just because, when he's in the game, he's going to score a touchdown, but he might not have been in that game, and on a Monday nighter, couldn't have done a whole lot for him. But again, we keep going back to our tight end days. The big teams had big tight ends. Waller was our tight end 2, so congrats on that one. And Cousins stepped up and was our quarterback 4. So that San Fran, Minnesota game really did put Maxon over the top, because before then he did have some disappointing outings by Lockett, by Goff, by Brown. Certainly Gabe Dave just didn't do a whole lot for him, so he needed the points. Najee actually took off the pads and did something this week, which was a nice plus. And so Maxon, well done, sir, because you definitely 3 fairly significant. I would say, Chase being your big one, but Hubbard is someone who's, might be getting you points now that there's some injuries. So you did survive a little bit of a bye-a-palooza. Dibbler, not so much, buddy. You had buys and injuries, and you seems to be your going rate right now. But if you look at your team, Charbonnet's also hurt. I think you might need some running back help. So, hey, if you're willing to take a trade, I'm willing to take a trade. Your wide receivers, too, just didn't really produce. Thomas did fine. Everyone else, not so great. Purdy, you were also hoping for a big Monday nighter, and he didn't really pan out for you there. You only had a couple people really going over the predicteds, and you would think Kittle would have been one of the people to celebrate National Tight End Day, but unfortunately he was not. He did fine, and like I said, in any other week he was probably top 5, but not this week, my friend. Anyway, I hope with the injuries slowly coming to an end, maybe you can bounce back a little bit, and you have dropped to the bottom of the pool here. So like I said, though, we're only halfway through. Things aren't over yet, so keep fighting. And Maxon, congratulations. 2nd in the league. Not too shabby. In the confidence builder between 2 ISK coaches who are getting ready to go on their way. Hopefully they haven't forgotten as they go to ISK. I know Rennie's already in Zim, and Rushke's already claimed his title by the time of recording this, the dual title, men and females cross country. While not all people seem to celebrate that much, I was watching some of the live stream. Come on, you got to put a little more effort into our cross country coverage here, folks. But congrats, Rushke. This mug's for you. Unfortunately, volleyball took cross country in this one as Rennie climbs out of the win list. He gets the 0 out of the total there and gets his first win. So how did he do so? I think it was a combo. Him doing well. Rushke, what a flex here. Puts in Dallas because I guess he didn't want to drop them or didn't pay attention, so no defense. Metcalf was hurt. And Watson, I don't know if anyone actually watched that game. Unfortunately, as a reluctant Browns fan, I did. Watson looked like he didn't even want to play. I think as coaches, we've always been in those cases where you put a kid on the floor and it looks like they're going to crap themselves, so you take them off. That was legitimately Watson. I know they say he's hurt, but something's up there, dude. Anyway, that kind of killed you because the rest of your team did quite. Allen did Allen-like things. He was our quarterback 5. Hill, wide receiver 5. And sure, Moore didn't go off for a crazy amount of points. Myers still keeping his way as one of the unsung heroes. Gus the Bus was actually running back, I think 6. He was just outside of our top 5, but come on, man. Gus the Bus getting you 22 and change. That's usually enough to win, especially if you look at Rennie and Brian Hoyer. I mentioned in a few previous segments here that the Las Vegas quarterback situation was not ideal, let's say. But he didn't need it, right? He didn't even actually use his second quarterback. He was essentially quarterbackless. But Kelsey, man, finally shown up. Clearly playing for someone in the stands, but 40 points on National Tight End Day, 179. Another day at the office. Josh Palmer trying to fight for one of the best Joshes in the league. Downs being the other one that I had on the bench. Downs did outdo him, but Palmer was actually played, so he actually got real points this week, so that's pretty good. Aside from that, Phillies defense, maybe not so surprisingly, surprisingly for some people against Miami. It seems like every time Miami plays a decent defense, though, they don't go off. So just bear in mind on that one, although who knows, NFL's about as consistent as herpes right now. And everyone else just kind of did what they should be doing or close to it, and that was enough for you, Rennie. So congrats. I think if we take a look at our bench, you were dealing with a massive bye week, Rushki. I get it. You didn't want to drop any of these people, apparently, to go pick up some help. So help will be coming next week as the buys are done, and we'll see how Fields does with his thumb. Rennie, you got the win, and you had 3 people that you consistently play, including both of your quarterbacks on the pine. So your quarterback buys are done. Congrats. If people stay healthy, you can just ride them out to the end. I don't know if Jimmy G's going to come into play at any point there. Certainly Jimmy G's backup, I hope, has already dropped off your team, but let's see how that works. Anyway, I don't want to fudge around on this one too much. Like I said, things aren't over yet. We're only at the halfway point, so everyone's live. But, Rennie, it's got to be good to get the monkey off the back, buddy. In our lowest score and tightest matchup, came down to under 5. That's always a good fight. Gene hangs on, 5-2 as well, tied for the top or the playoff spots here and playoff berths. You're in our top 4. Timmy just fell outside again. Again, this was a tough one for you. Looking at your scores here, we're going to get to you in just a second, but obviously a little bit of disappointment. First, let's just talk Gene. Number 1. If Taylor's going to come back, you just got a number 1 running back. He seems now that the pendulum is swinging his way, and outside of Moss is getting some love, but certainly not as much as Taylor, so congrats on that one. Herbert did not have the game you thought he would. Allen definitely let you down. And Jacobs was a massive disappointment, so it really was on you. I mean, you took the kid that I can't stop reading about, the son of the arm wrestling champion that has a storied Div 2 career, came on, did just enough against Vegas, which helped you out, especially considering, we're taking the D out of Detroit, and they got pummeled by Baltimore. But your guys that scored, Hawkinson again, another tight end who scored almost 20 but didn't get into our top. Oh, no, he's our tight end 4. I apologize. So another guy that's celebrating tight end day. More than made up for it, and you did more than enough. Timmy, you had one of those tough ones. Laporta just over his average. Mayfield just over his average. Your defense, obviously, Duello was the defense number 1. Warren just fighting for his cause, but everybody else really let you down. Moore didn't, but he's just kind of a letdown in general. But looking at your bench, buddy, you had a rough week on the go. The fact that you were 5 points, there's nothing you could have done aside from picking up someone, and that means you have to drop one of these kids because Miami actually would have hurt you, even though 12 points is normally pretty good for a D. Just crap luck on bad bye weeks, but you got your Buyapalooza done. I can't see it being any worse than this, and you just got to hope that Jefferson comes back when he's supposed to, and before it's too late. But give credit where credit's deserved. Gene, it wasn't a pretty one, but they don't have to be pretty to be wins. Before we get to week 8, just a quick look at what I'm talking about here. So we do have a top-heavy situation going on, a 3-way tie here essentially for second that's decided by points, and even the points are quite tight. That could be 1 week and things could swing. Woody's on the outside looking in, but he's actually got more points than the rest of us. He's our 3rd highest scoring person, or 4th, 3rd. Rushke is number 1. But look at what I was talking about before about Marco being the most unlucky. Sure, okay, Marco, you haven't been scoring as many points, okay? But check that situation out, 1,140. That is legit 100 more than everybody else is dealing with. Oh, no, sorry, didn't look down here. Almost 100. Rennie can also complain. That's kind of crap too. So there is a second half for a reason, okay? That's we're making our march starting now to the kind of second part of the season. You can go on a run. Obviously, if you were mathematically out, you would know it because it would tell you. Now, I didn't get to recording this one. I got my shipment coming in, and it really threw me for a loop. So I've been dealing with that. Plus, I have a team to follow in ISK, and I've been watching their game. So I didn't quite get finished. So as you can see here, Thursday night has already happened. We do have a few people who've already had some updated scores, but some decent matches going through. Seems like we always have at least 1 or 2. I mean, we've got Connor kind of going against Tim, and Tim has been up and down, and it looks like there's maybe a little window of opportunity here. We got the battle of the basement, 9 versus 10. One of you got to have 2 wins unless you decide to tie. Marco in here, can I continue your run of teams going off and scoring against you? Or are you going to start a second half of better luck and maybe I'll choke it? But really down here, we got 5 versus 6, which can be quite pivotal. Like I said, you're just outside of the top 4. And here we have there is going to be a team with 6, but there's also going to be a team with 3 losses coming out of here. So there is going to be room to grow. And it looks, in terms of the point value right now, like it could be pretty tight. Reminder for week 8, there is no bye weeks. I don't understand this NFL schedule. Why do you have 6 in one week and none in the other? Probably has something to do with TV and fields and crap like that. But either way, everyone should be back except for your injured folks. So hopefully that meant not so much struggle or having to start people that aren't playing. All right, so Rush Game, looking at you in this one. Maybe pay attention, pal, because it looks like you could use a win here. Aside from that, though, best of luck in week 8, gentlemen.